Hello, I'm Laurie Munch, a volunteer with the Funder Plus program at the Community Foundation for Surrey. And this is one of our videos, and this is one on risk management. Over the last 5 years, Funder Plus has assisted some 50 charities develop a go-forward strategy, their business plans and accounts, and helping new trustees to settle in. During this period, thanks to you, we gained a lot of experience and thought it valuable to share this with you by way of videos. And as I said a moment ago, this one is on risk management. So you might ask the question, well, why start here? Well, in our view, this is a fundamental starting point on your journey to developing a strategic and business plan for your trustees. And we do recommend that you watch our 2 videos on business planning. Well, at times, I'm sure the CEOs would acknowledge, at times running a charity can feel overwhelming. And are they under pressure? You bet. You've got continuity of key staff, you've got changing regulations, you've got to manage incidents, you've got governance issues on the right-hand side. Is the board as effective as it could be? And those accounts always a bit challenging. And I hope not, but sometimes perhaps the reputation of your charity might be at risk. How do we get a grip on this, and how, in the first instance, do we turn it into part of the business plan? I'm sure you're aware that public companies, and I'm a director of a public company in the UK, we have to conduct an annual risk assessment, and charities are obliged to have a risk register as well. And the typical approach, whether you're in business or in a charity, a typical approach is to categorize your risks in terms of strategic, operational, funding, and sustainability. And a very useful approach is to score your risks 1 to 5, 5 being a low risk, 1 being a low risk, 5 being a high risk, on probability and impact. I'm sure you appreciate what probability and impact is, but let me go to extremes in explaining this. The probability of an aircraft crashing worldwide these days is infinitesimally small. When it does happen, it gets a lot of publicity, but given the number of flights every day, it's really, really small. But the impact, of course, is catastrophic. And that's the distinction between the two. It's also useful for you to think about whether the risk has increased from the previous year, and how urgent is it to attend to that risk that you've now uncovered. Let's look at those categories of risk that I spoke about a moment ago, those four categories of risk, let me get the camera right, that I spoke about a moment ago. And here I'm just going to pick up a wand for convenience. So we've got our strategic risks, and these relate to the longer term direction and positioning of the charity. I need to emphasize these are examples, and the trustees need obviously to reflect on their own circumstances. One risk might be mission drift, losing focus on your core objectives for the reasons I've indicated there. Another might be some form of reputational damage as a result of public or media scrutiny. we're certainly facing policy and regulatory changes by way of changes in government in all of those categories over here. And competition, well, there's certainly increased competition for funding and influence. And perhaps, I hope not the case, perhaps the charity is at risk of failing to adapt, failing to innovate or respond to a changing, emerging need, or perhaps even new technologies like AI. Operational risks are those affecting day-to-day functioning. Governance failures as a result of weak board oversight or a lack of skills. Perhaps, and we get lots of publicity about this in the media, of course, data protection and cyber security, the risk of a data breach, for heaven's sake, I hope not, under GDPR, and certainly increasing cyber threats. Staff and volunteer management, you really should be alert to the retention of your staff and the risk of burnout. And it's so much easier to retain a current CEO or team member or a volunteer than to find a new one. Typically considered a factor of 6. Supply chain disruptions, especially if you're a local community that is providing services, a cafe or something like that, a village hall. And as a result, there may be some service delivery risks, failures in quality, consistency, etc. Funding risks, I'm sure certainly CEOs and the trustees would be aware of this, relating to the sources and, really important, the stability of income. Are you over-reliant on key funders, dependent on, for example, a lottery grant, which is great to get, but it may have a limited period to run, or perhaps a major donor? A reduction in public funding as a result of austerity measures, and it looks like that situation is on the table. And this results in volatile income streams, unpredictable donation levels, especially in times of economic uncertainty, such as we're facing at the moment. Fundraising compliance, the risk of breaching regulator rules or some form of donor fatigue. And it's really important for you to have a good grasp on restricted funding, grants that limit the flexibility and increased overhead burdens that require unrestricted funds. And that's a topic that we go into in a lot of detail in our 3 charities on accounting, but on charity accounting. Sustainability risks, in many respects, package all of those together. And these concern the long-term health and resilience of the charity, its financial resilience, its environmental impact with increasing expectations to demonstrate sustainable credentials, your dependence on individuals, either a charismatic founder or a really valuable CEO, or perhaps a key donor. A lack of succession planning, no pipeline for leadership or key roles, and the failure to diversify your income and not looking for alternative funding streams. So here is an example. I really must emphasize, this is an example of those probability and impact scores 1 to 5 that we spoke about a few slides ago. It's really important that you undertake an exercise with your trustees to review these given your own circumstances. So here are our strategic risks, our operational risks, our funding risks, and our sustainability risks. And here I've scored. And again, I emphasize these are purely examples. The likely risk that you may face on media scrutiny or some form of public backlash. And that depends on the nature of charity, the nature of the service you're providing. I won't go through all of these in detail because it's an example for you to consider. But we've scored 4 out of 5 on the probability of that happening. And its impact would obviously be pretty serious. That's a top score. We multiply the two and it comes out to 20. And you've scored, whoever put this initial view together, they've scored that the risk of this is going up. And you can repeat this for your operational risks, in this case, staff and volunteer shortages. Retention pressures are increasing with rising workloads, is a note associated with that. Safeguarding failures. Well, you may be really, really careful on your safeguarding policy and ensure that all of your volunteers and staff are well coached here, in which case the probability is quite low. You score it at 2, but the impact, again, any failure can have high reputational and legal consequences. Again, you can take your time and look through the rest of these as an example. What's important, though, having done that part of the exercise, is to produce a mitigation plan. And here we've taken examples of what the exercise revealed in terms of the most significant risks, the higher scores, and risks that are increasing or need urgent attention. And here I've written the charity has recently faced media scrutiny and public backlash as a result of a safeguarding incident. I haven't written the mitigation plan because that's for you to think about if this risk is relevant to you. And certainly the risk is increasing and you need to treat it. Under operational risks, you need to describe the typical day-to-day operational challenges. And here we're looking at staff and volunteer shortages. Retention pressures are increasing with rising workloads and a limited budget to pay competitive wages. So the risk is increasing, you're going to treat it. And the owner may be, if you're a village centre, the owner may be your village centre. Again, you need a mitigation plan for this. And here we're talking about funding risks, the failure to raise sufficient funds to meet objectives. The risk is increasing and the owner is the treasurer plus the trustees. Because of the reorganisation of local council, we've been unable to match last year's funding target. Again, requires a mitigation plan. So in summary, understanding your risks in this way is the first step in preparing a strategic and or business plan. And to use that triage term, it helps you get a grip on the most important issues. And it certainly provides the Board of Trustees, the trustees, with an important sense of direction. We, of course, welcome your feedback on this video. And if you'd like to talk to us about Funder Plus support, please contact us at funderplus@cfsurrey.org.uk. But always, in the first instance, have a word with your local volunteer action group, and they may well be able to assist you. This video is for general guidance only and does not replace the need for professional advice in relation to your specific circumstances. Goodbye for now, and do have a look at some of our other videos if you found this one useful.